Welcome to our forum featuring candidates from the House of Representatives 27th District. My name is Reagan Cusimanio. I am the co-chair of the Overland Park Chamber Public Policy and Advocacy Committee. I'd like to welcome everybody here today, and I'd like to welcome everybody online to our forum. I'd like to thank the Public Policy Council, which is a collaborative effort of the 10 chambers of commerce that represent more than 5,000 Johnson County businesses. In addition to hosting forums such as this, the Public Policy Council conducts other voter education efforts, including publishing a wealth of candidate information on the council's website, which is www.votejoco.com. I'd like to take a moment to introduce and welcome our candidates. We have current Representative Sean Tarwater. He is the, as I said, current representative for the 27th District in the Kansas House. He has held that seat since 2017. He currently chairs the House Commerce Committee and serves on several other committees, including Appropriations and K-12 Budget Committee. Outside of the legislature, Sean has developed several small businesses and is active with his church and his children's school and sporting activities. We also have Christi Pribula. Did I say that correctly?
You did.
Thank you. Christi was raised in Colorado Springs, Colorado, but found her way to Kansas when she enrolled in school at KU. She and her husband established their home in Overland Park, where they have resided ever since. She served as a legal trust attorney in a large Kansas City-based company before starting her own law firm focused on estate planning services. She is active in the community, serving in various roles, including a 2-time chair of the Spofford Gala and volunteer roles with her children's schools. Each candidate is going to be given 2 minutes for an opening statement, and after opening comments, we will rotate through the questions written by the Public Policy Council, with each candidate having 2 minutes to answer each question. We will not be taking questions from the audience today. Because this is a forum and not a debate, we have not built in time for rebuttal. And at the closing of our Q&A, a period will be given for each candidate of 1 minute for closing remarks. Prior to starting the forum, we drew numbers to determine who would speak first. And based on that random drawing, we will begin with Sean Tarwater and his opening statement. Thank you. Sean, go ahead and give us your opening statement.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for hosting the event today, and thank all you people for coming out today. My name is Sean Tarwater. I'm a third-generation Kansas. I'm homegrown, and I was born and raised here in the metropolitan area. I went to Rockers High School, and stayed in town for college, went to UMKC, graduated there with a master's degree in business. My wife Lexi and I have 4 kids that we've raised. 2 of them are at KU, one of them is at KU, 2 of them are at K-State, and our baby is at Rockers High School as a junior right now. I've been in the legislature for 6 years, and have become an effective leader in the Republican Party and in the State House. I have a 100% voting record with the Overland Park Chamber, and after just my first 2 years here, I was appointed the chair of the House Commerce Committee, and I have proven that I can work with Republicans and Democrats alike. Commerce has passed many bipartisan bills, and a lot of them where we did quite a bit of heavy lifting. And I often boast about my committee with the fact that you could look around the room and not recognize, not really know who was a Democrat or who was a Republican, because I encourage everyone to participate, and our bills come out with that in mind. And when we take it to the floor, we get bipartisan votes that are pretty incredible. And so my time is up, and I'll move on.
Thank you. Christi, 2 minutes for you as well.
Thank you to the Johnson County Public Policy Council and everyone who's tuning in from home. I am Christi Pribula. I am the Democratic candidate for Kansas House District 27, which is in the southeast corner of Johnson County. I am a practicing attorney in both Kansas and Missouri, and I'm the mother of 4 sons. My oldest son is turning 16 this week, and he goes to Blue Valley High School. I have a 12-year-old Noah, a 10-year-old Evan, and a 4.5-year-old Jace. I currently own my own legal practice, which is what allows me to be running for this seat and seeking to serve our community in this capacity. While listening to voters in our district, I repeatedly hear support for public education, women's rights, and a return back to bipartisanship and a more moderate role in governance. Our state does not have mountains or oceans, so we rely on our excellent public schools and quality of life to attract businesses to Kansas. And funding our public schools, including special education, healthcare access, and tax reform are all good for business in Kansas. We need to get back to governance favored by the people and not governance that reflects the donor special interest groups to the majority. The Kansas legislature should prioritize people over politics, and I will strive to do that every day. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to start with our questions. And Christi, we will start with you. Our first question, as a candidate, what are your top 3 policy priorities?
My top 3 policy priorities are public education funding and supporting finding solutions to teacher retention issues, which are reaching a critical impasse in our community, and fully funding special education. Because I have children in the public schools, I am intimately aware of the effect of the lack of funding over the last 10 years. Special education particularly is still not fully funded, and we can't find enough paras, and the paras we do have make just enough money that they don't qualify for food stamps, but not enough money that they can buy food. So we need to be funding our schools. If that's an issue in Blue Valley schools, I can only imagine what is happening in other school districts throughout Kansas. I am also focused on healthcare, Medicaid expansion that would bring healthcare access to approximately 165,000 Kansans, including a number of veterans, and protecting a woman's right to make their own healthcare decisions without government interference. My third priority is tax reform to improve the economic climate in Kansas. I would support property tax reductions, especially for people who are on fixed incomes and retirees, so that they will not be taxed out of their homes. I believe we should have ended the grocery tax last session and would make a vote to end the grocery tax immediately upon election. And I support an increased access to the Kansas Promise scholarships that help to keep students committed to living in Kansas after graduation. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question for you, Sean.
As it relates to business, we need to continue to look at reducing regulatory issues and the tax burden on Kansas businesses and promote economic development, as we did with the Apex bill this last year. We'll continue to focus on workforce development through education, skills training, workforce, housing, recruitment of out-of-state employees. And we've got a plan for all of that. Currently, I am chairing a workforce development committee. We've had one meeting, and we'll have another one in mid-November. As it relates to constituents, we need more property tax relief. We had some success with some property tax issues this year, but I think we need to go further, especially as it pertains to fixed income and retired individuals. We must continue to fight for our schools and especially our children and make sure that every Kansas has an opportunity to receive a world-class education. Finally, we need to continue to make necessary changes to deliver services to citizens in a reliable and fraud-free manner, keeping the Department of Labor in mind with all the problems that we had when Kansans were in need. Finally, on the grocery tax that was brought up, we did pass a bill a couple of years ago that would have reduced the tax to zero, but it was vetoed. We redid that bill this year, and it's finally signed, and I'm glad it was.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question, and we'll start with you, Sean. What are your views on the state tax policy, being as specific as you can?
Well, I'd like to start with some of the accomplishments that we got this session. At your door 2 years ago, I promised that I would bring back your tax deductions that were lost in the 2017 federal bill when they moved the deduction to $12,500 or whatever it was. It is now $12,900 and $25,900 for families. When that happened, we couldn't deduct our personal stuff in Kansas. We made that change this year, saving Kansas thousands of dollars. We increased the standard deduction for all Kansans so that if you don't have very many deductions, you still will pay less taxes. I had a bill that doubled your exemption on your property taxes, and that was put into the tax bill, property tax bill. So now instead of the first $20,000 being tax-free, the first $40,000 are tax-free, and that will increase at a inflationary rate going forward. And that's something that I know we had been working on for many years. We finally got that done. We gave teachers a tax credit for supplies that if they buy supplies in the classroom. We passed the property tax transparency bill that kept from automatic increases when your house got increased in value. We eliminated the sales tax on food by 2025, and our corporate income tax actually went down by 0.5% because of the Apex bill. Going forward, now that Kansans are facing unprecedented inflation, we need to make sure that they keep more of their money. Kansas tax burden is directly related to our out-migration issue, which is why I will support Derek Smith's plan to have a tax-free retirement for our retirees, as well as freezing property tax for the retirees.
Thank you, Sean. Christi, same question for you.
Well, while I have not been elected to the legislature, I haven't had a direct impact on our tax policy. I do believe that taxes should be fair and balanced and should be invested transparently into our state. Our taxes should support strong public education systems, our foster care, our infrastructure, and our quality of life. We are currently being nickel and dimed in a tax shell game where we pay state income taxes, sales taxes, personal property taxes, localities taxes, property taxes, and grocery taxes. And I'm sure I've missed some. We have so many taxes everywhere. And now that Kansas has improved our economic standing after the reversal of the disastrous Brownback administration tax experiment, it's time for an analysis and a reduction in the sales taxes and property taxes that have climbed. Those are having a direct impact on our residents' financial security. My tax policy is that taxes should be streamlined, progressive, and our budget should focus on things that Kansans support. Fully funding public education, including special education, Medicaid expansion, which is leaving federal money out of our economy, $1.3 billion this year, and infrastructure investments that keep Kansas a wonderful place to live. The out-migration problems that we are facing, we could stop focusing on social issues that are causing a number of those as well. And by focusing on policies that keep Kansas attractive for business, we can stop the out-migration. Thank you.
We'll go on to the next question. What are your views on K-12 education funding and accessibility? And we will start again with you, Christi, and then move to Sean.
Okay, well, I'm going to start to sound like a broken record because my children have never seen fully funded schools. My son was a kindergartner the year that school funding was cut by the Brownback administration, and I have had a front row seat to watching kids leaving for private schools, to watching teachers doing more with less, and ultimately I believe that failing to fund our public schools is failing our future. All Kansas kids deserve a world-class education, as Representative Tarwater said, and a fully funded special education program. Every child deserves a quality education. Investments into education encourage businesses to invest here, knowing that their workers will be well qualified and will put down roots in our great state. We need to listen to educators in order to solve the retention crisis that we are facing, as the current rate is unsustainable. And we need to pay our educators and other educational staff living wages and treat them like the professionals that they are. We need to give Kansas graduates a reason to want to come back to stay in our community. And without mountains or oceans, our public schools are our key to doing that. This should not be a partisan issue. Strong public schools benefit everyone in our communities, and they are a public good for Kansas. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, same question for you.
Okay, thank you. I always put our school and our children as my first priority. My mother, my sister, and my mother-in-law are all teachers, and I keep them in mind as I go through the day in K-12 budget and in appropriations when it comes to schools. I worked with Governor Collier to construct our current funding bill that the Kansas Supreme Court has agreed is constitutional, and that does include special needs funding. The bill has inflationary increases every year so that schools will always be 100% funded, and no governor will ever have to worry about taking credit for being the education governor. Schools are now receiving $2 billion more than when I first was elected, and Blue Valley is currently budgeted for almost $18,000 per pupil, and that is a tremendous increase over where they were just 6 years ago. I've always consistently voted to fund our schools. In fact, we've gone above and beyond that many times. I consistently vote to add money for safety and security. I add money every year for mental health, and these are not in the current school budget. They're usually allotted by the governor, and we add them back in. And this is on top of the constitutional funding. I always work hand in hand with the Blue Valley School District, which is my school district, and I have successfully brought a motion to protect teachers from lawsuits in the transparency bill. I've also successfully brought a motion to limit open enrollment. That was a very big concern of Blue Valley's when open enrollment came about, and I brought an amendment to make it so that school boards could set capacity, including 0. So if you don't want to have kids from outside your district come to your district, the school board can elect not to do so because of the amendment I brought. Instead of carte blanche enrollment, they can now pick and choose. And some of those, some districts might want to add those students because it comes with the state funding, and they'll be able to do that.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question. We'll start with you, Sean. What types of economic development policies do you support to encourage job growth and business expansion in the state of Kansas?
Well, as you know, I've been the chairman of the Commerce Committee for the past 4 years. Economic development has been an issue and has been an area of target, I guess you could say, over the last several years. We have revamped and rewritten every single economic development bill in the state of Kansas. Most recently, we added a new bill called the Apex Bill, and it was designed to bring industries to Kansas, not just an individual company. And so as you saw with the Panasonic success, we brought a battery-powered motor vehicle business to town that will also bring all their suppliers and hopefully even manufacturers to town. And I think we should focus more on that as we go forward. That particular project will be over $5 billion, $5 billion, and about 8,000 jobs, including the suppliers, all well paying. It also lowered the corporate income tax by 0.5%. We need to do more in Kansas for all businesses, keeping in mind that we want to bring more companies here, but we also want to take care of our current businesses. We're going to be focused on that in the future now that we have all our incentive bills. But thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Christi, same question for you.
I support economic development policies that are transparent and accountable for any incentive programs with clawbacks and with regular audits of those programs. I support workforce development programs that will help Kansas retain and recruit high-quality jobs and high-quality employers. I applauded the Panasonic agreement. I think that that is a wonderful opportunity for Johnson County. Representative Tarwater did help to shepherd that through, but then threw cold water on it in a Kansas City Star article about how he believed the project was going to exasperate Kansas's existing labor force and inflation issues, not solving it. So ultimately, right now we're getting mixed messages out of the legislature on if that was a good deal or not, and we deserve some transparency on that rather than political spin. I support policies and programs that encourage retention of graduates from Kansas institutions of higher learning to address the needs of our community in healthcare, infrastructure, teaching, and I support policies that will expand and promote worksite childcare programs to benefit working parents. As I mentioned previously, investing into our Kansas Promise scholarships where students can attend technical schools or trade schools or any associate program as long as they commit to remaining in Kansas for 2 years. That could also be very helpful in retaining retaining workers after graduation. Thank you.
Thank you, Christi. We'll go on to our next question. What would you do to grow and develop the state's workforce? Christi, we'll start with you.
All of these questions feel very circular, so I'm sorry that I'm going to sound repetitive, but I do support continuing to grow and expand the Kansas Promise Scholarship. I had left out information technology and security and mental and physical health care and advanced manufacturing and building trades. So all of those industries would benefit from it. It ensures the commitment from recipients to stay in Kansas. We should also be looking at reforming pay for disabled persons such that they can be paid fairly for the work that they are doing. I would support finding creative solutions to our current teacher shortage, which is currently over 1,600 teacher vacancies right now, as a strong education system is necessary for a good economic climate. We cannot grow if we are not providing access to quality and fully funded education and affordable childcare. We should also be looking at reforming pay for, I moved that, sorry. The bottom line is I support workforce development policies that will make Kansas a great place to live with affordable health care and excellent public schools everywhere in the state.
Thank you. Sean, same question for you.
Workforce development, I think, is going to be our single largest issue in the business community going forward, at least for the next couple of years. I've been granted an interim committee on workforce development. As I mentioned earlier, we've had our first meeting. We'll have another one in November. We must create innovative ways to keep our college graduates in Kansas. Currently, 62% of them leave the state. We need to do more of what we did with the Promise Act, which was a commerce bill that we worked on for 2 years. It was vetoed it was vetoed at first. We brought it back the following year. The exact same bill. It was finally signed, and we're having huge success with it. All kinds of kids that were staring out the windows in grade school or high school and would otherwise end up not going to college because they didn't think there was a future for them, are now going to college and figuring out that they can be successful and contribute to society. We need to continue our efforts to popularize the trades and create a highly skilled workforce to fill tens of thousands of high-paying, highly technical trade jobs. One of the things that we did this year, after working on it for 5 years with the Overland Park Chamber here, was provide liability protection for businesses that allow students to come in and learn about the trades. They were worried about opening their doors to our students because they were worried about liability issues. After 5 years of hard work, we finally got that cleared up, so we're hoping that will make an impact. Finally, we need to eliminate state and federal barriers that are barriers to entry or devalue work, creates cycles of dependency, and prevents people from bettering themselves. We'll get more on that a little bit later, I think. In regards to teacher shortage, I made a motion and the teacher shortage is not unique to Kansas, it's nationwide. I made a motion in the Appropriations Committee to double the number of teacher scholarships, and it was successful. I have a plan that I'm working on to take pairs to teachers through online training and give them credit for their classroom time. And that will help a clear path to teacher for a pair to become a teacher. I have a plan for no income tax for K-12 teachers and reduced or elimination of tuition for teaching in classrooms. Currently, they have to pay the college they go to when they do classroom teaching, and I think that's wrong.
Thank you. Same question for, going on to the next question. What are your views of the state's role with respect to ensuring access and affordability of post-secondary education? And we will start with you, Sean.
Okay, great. Well, as I was just talking about, I did champion the Kansas Promise Act. It does provide a 2-year degree to students that may have otherwise not attended college. In turn, these students must live and work in Kansas, and we've had great success with that so far. We think this is going to be the first step in helping the out-migration issue. We need to look at the same type of program for out-of-state, giving an out-of-state person in-state tuition. We talked about that in our most recent Workforce Development Committee meeting last week, and in turn for out-of-state tuition, they would commit to living and working in Kansas for a certain period of time, or they would have to pay us back for the difference if they left the state. This helps provide access to post-secondary education, and it helps workforce development. I sit on the Appropriation Committee and have consistently worked with our higher education institutions to make sure that the tuition increases are kept to a minimum, and in fact, sometimes are kept to zero. We must encourage work-study programs. Those students need higher wages and tuition credits. Currently, when you go to college and you work there, you're paid much less than you would be if you work off campus, and you don't really get any tuition credited for that. That needs to change. We need those individuals that are willing to work to go to college to be paid a fair wage, and we need to have reduced tuition to do so. I want to find a way to encourage and incentivize a work-to-learn program similar to what goes on at Wichita State's NIAR Works program, where they hire 50 individuals each quarter. They train them, they work for high wages, and they get their education paid for in the aviation industry. It's a neat program. Look for it, and look for more of that coming out of the Commerce Committee next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Christi, same question for you.
I think when we see numbers like 62% of college graduates migrating out of Kansas, that is a problem that means we have to dig even deeper on why are people leaving Kansas. Could it be the last 10 years we have underfunded our schools, we have villainized teachers? That might be a nationwide problem, but ultimately it's happening here in Kansas. I went to parent-teacher back to school nights, and I heard teachers saying, if you don't like these books, let me know, we'll come up with an alternate. And it felt like they were feeling very defensive of their curriculum. That's not how we should be conducting business in Kansas. But regardless, the state should have some role in creating apprenticeship programs, in creating loan forgiveness programs if necessary, and ensuring that access to higher education in whatever form a student wishes to do it is available. We should not be putting medical students into debt for the rest of their lives. We should be investing into our trade schools, into our mechanics, into engineering programs, into all of the STEM activities that will really engage our community and move us forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move to our next section. What do you believe the takeaways are for state lawmakers, or what should the takeaways be for state lawmakers from the COVID-19 pandemic experience? Christi, we will start with you.
The takeaways from the pandemic, I think we all got the wrong messaging. We saw so much finger pointing instead of leadership as we came out of the pandemic. During the time of crisis, our state lawmakers should be united in leading Kansans forward safely. Instead of finding solutions for assisting small businesses at the height of the pandemic, they focused on usurping executive authority. That became a priority. So instead of grocery tax relief, we are continuing to battle high food prices until at least 2025. Checks and balances in our government continue to be necessary. Investing all authority into a single branch resulted in good legislation being ignored, and in favor of legislation focused on power. So ultimately, what we should be learning from the pandemic is about how our leadership needs to work together and not be pointing fingers looking for partisan points. Instead, figure out how to lead our state forward. Thank you.
All right, Sean, same question for you.
What I took away from the pandemic and the damage that was done to the state of Kansas is that the government needs to stay out of private businesses and churches. No politician should be able to decide whose job is more important or whose business is more important than the other. And I worked to make sure that that won't ever happen again. And if the government decides they will have the authority to shut a group of businesses down for a pandemic, then they need to participate and be accountable for the losses that they cause. Businesses should be able to decide what's best for them, and they should be able to sell safety to the individual client. And if the individual client feels safe going to that business, then they should go. If they don't feel safe going to that business, then they should stay home and find an alternative way to get the service. Bottom line is the power of the government is too great, and we have to take it away.
Thank you. We'll go on to our next question. What are your views on healthcare policy and Medicaid expansion? And we'll start with you, Sean.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with a story about my younger brother, Brian, who had a traumatic brain injury. He had an injury, and he had nothing to his name. He didn't work, didn't have a dime, and he was in the hospital for long periods of time. He never could get help. We We tried and we tried and we tried to get him on Medicaid. We finally succeeded after about 6 months of paying attorneys, the hospital paid attorneys, and we finally succeeded in getting him onto Medicaid just before he died. I also want to tell you a story about a business that I owned in St. Charles, Missouri. Missouri hadn't expanded Medicaid and Illinois did. We had all kinds of problems trying to hire Illinois people, and this is a workforce development issue, it really is. We couldn't hire somebody from Illinois unless we paid them less than we paid our Missouri people. So we created a new job for them. And a lot of them were very successful people and were good at what they did. They were on the inbound calls. And in order for them to be proceeded through the company, they had to go from $17,000 up to $35,000 before they could get to 70 or 80 in sales. They would not take it, not a single one of them would take it. We tried to offer them insurance, no one would take insurance because it came with a deductible. Instead of having free drugs and free everything, they had to actually participate so they wouldn't take health insurance. Bottom line is on workforce development, if you think you have a problem now, try giving somebody free health care and then tell them they can't make more than $17,000 and see what that gets you with that person. Lastly, there are 81,000 people in the marketplace program that are enrolled in our real insurance programs in Kansas through Obamacare. Those are 81,000 people that are paying for health insurance that will be forced off of Medicaid. Those people will then have to fight for doctors because the reimbursement rate is much lower, and it will affect our rural hospitals who usually have a census of 2 or 3 right now. The bottom line is this Medicaid is for people like my brother Brian. We have thousands of people in the state of Kansas on waiting lists, and we're jumping over them to give somebody free insurance that can work but doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you. Christi, same question for you.
I believe we should be expanding Medicaid. It will help to control inflating health insurance costs because uncompensated care ends up being added on to all the rest of our bills. And hospital costs across the board have just increased. People with access to affordable health care can receive preventive treatments before conditions become so far along to be irreversible or egregiously expensive. Speaking of rural hospitals, 4 rural hospitals have closed in recent years. That means no access to emergency care, surgery, safe places to give birth, or other healthcare services. Hundreds and hundreds of people lost their jobs as those hospitals closed. Military veterans and their families would benefit enormously from expansion. About 7,400 veterans and their spouses would gain access to quality, affordable health care coverage with Medicaid expansion. Veterans often do not have automatic and easy access to health care through the Department of Veteran Affairs, despite their service to our country. And I do think that there's a misconception about who is on Medicaid. It is often disabled people, and we do have years and years of waiting lists, which means we should solve that problem by funding Medicaid. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go to our next question, and Christi, we'll start with you. Control over decision-making has been divided amongst the state legislature and local governments, including school boards. These issues such as taxation, economic development, and education have been a matter of debate. What are your views on the issue?
I do believe that voters elect a state school board and we elect local school boards, and so the legislature should not be usurping the authority of those elected positions for specific issues like implementing curriculum decisions and unfunded mandates, which the open enrollment bill, that's really what it amounted to. It was telling the school districts that they had to open up any capacity to, if they had capacity, they had to accept students. And then what happens when kids move into that district during the school year? No funding comes with them. So legislators are elected as well, but given the redistricting showcased that they were willing to choose their voters instead of allowing the voters to choose their legislators, it's important for the legislature to respect our school boards, both the state school board and the local school board, and the legislature should focus on economic development, taxation, education funding, including special ed and infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, same question for you.
I'm a proponent of local control. Your local politicians know your needs better than lawmakers on the other side of the state. And you can affect change in your local elections a lot easier by going out and talking to your neighbors and knocking on doors and effectively making change. That's why, as Chrissy just said, the open enrollment bill was one that caused a lot of controversy in this area, and that's why I brought the amendment that I did that allowed your local community to make the decision. You get to go to your local school board meeting because they're going to have a public meeting when this happens. You can weigh in on that decision, and they can vote on capacity, including zero. And that was a motion that I brought after hearing the concerns of my people in my district. And so I think that the more that we can force down to the local area, the better. And with that being said, there are occasions where the state can help things like eco-depot programs and regulations for law and business so that they're uniform rather than piecemeal throughout the state. Other than that, most of the things should be local control.
All right, thank you. Our next question. What do you believe most distinguishes you from your opponent in the race? And Sean, we will start with you.
I would say that experience matters. I've been in the legislature for 6 years. I've been on the appropriations committee for 6 years, and everything in that state house comes through that committee. And so you have after a time, you acquire a certain level of institutional knowledge that helps you help your friends get things done, and that includes people on both sides of the aisle.
All right. Christi?
I am a licensed attorney, so I understand the importance of creating laws that are not vague or subject to misinterpretation. I am a mother whose children have never seen fully funded public schools, so I carry their experiences and their friends' experiences. We'll carry them with me to the legislature. I'm a community member who's listened to the teachers and families about why special education must be fully funded now, which when our current representative voted against it, felt incredibly egregious, and is why I entered the race. I am actually uniquely qualified to serve in this position in that I have lived in Stillwell, Bucyrus, and in Southern Overland Park, so I understand the complexity of this district in representing the various interests in all corners of this district so that all residents feel like they have a voice. Above all, what distinguishes me the most is that I listen to the people I would be representing, and I will respond respectfully to people who disagree with me and provide transparency and an independent voice in the legislature. I'm not sure that Sean can say he represents independently when he votes in line with the GOP supermajority on every bill. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you for sharing your thoughts and for being here with us today. We're going to turn our attention to our closing comments, and you will each have 1 minute. And Christi, we will start with you for your closing comment, and then we'll move to Sean.
Thank you again to the Johnson County Public Policy Council and everybody who's tuning in to watch this. The role of government needs to be a long game for the benefit of our community. And if you are not willing to play it fairly and transparently, you should not be in office. Our district deserves a representative that after negotiating and voting for a deal such as the Panasonic plant in Gardner doesn't turn around and call it a bad deal for partisan gamesmanship. Representing our district, which includes the southeast corner of Johnson County and Blue Valley schools, requires voting for our public schools. And even if capacity could now be set to 0, that's a vote they shouldn't have to take. We should be fully funding special education, immediately ending the grocery tax, and doing real problem solving for property taxes. We deserve a representative that will represent all constituents, and that is just not happening when we vote in line with Republican leadership over and over. We all deserve representation that will listen and assist in solving real issues, not drumming up partisan games. I humbly ask for your vote, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Christi. Same for you, Sean.
Thank you. Although this is a citizen legislature and supposed to be a part-time position, I have made representing you a full-time job. I sold my business soon after I was elected, and I dedicated my time to serving you. I sit on many interim committees, and I chair several of them. I work with the Chambers of Commerce and represent representatives from all over the state. Legislators from both sides of the aisle come to me with their issues, and together we are effective and successful. Let's not take a step backwards, but instead charge forward for a better Johnson County. And I would like to address a couple of things in regard to fully funding schools. We have fully funded schools for the last 5 years since Governor Collier signed that bill. And in fact, I have an email from my opponent here thanking me for fully funding their schools, including all-day kindergarten, to prove it. So I don't know where the messaging got mixed up, but we have fully funded schools since Governor Collier signed that bill, and I plan to always vote to fully fund your schools. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank both of our candidates for participating in the forum and your willingness to serve the people of the state of Kansas and Johnson County. I would also like to remind the audience that a recording of today's forum will be available along with other election-related information on www.votejoco.com. And I would also like to remind you that advanced voting in person begins Saturday, October the 22nd, and election day is Tuesday, November the 8th. Thank you so much for participating. We appreciate all of you being here today.